All right, so introduction to learning theory and why it matters. Um, so hopefully you guys have read the assignments that we gave you. So why do you think learning theories matter, and how do you think we can apply these theories? So here is my session objectives for this talk. Hopefully by the end of this session, you'll be able to apply basic learning theory to analyze your clinical case studies and be able to design a student-centered classroom. So we'll take terms of learning strategies for this specific session. We will have, a 1-minute essay where you'll take time to think about what we've learned, and then we'll have a think, pair, and share exercise. So here's my roadmap. We'll spend a very brief time talking about learning theories, and then we'll talk about the 3 different domains of learning, and we'll spend a good amount of time on Bloom's taxonomy. So what are learning theories? The progression in the past, 50, 60 years, people have been thinking about learning from just speculation to it being actually a science. And there have been key shifts in how we define learning. The shifts have been from learning being just a memorization to learning being as an understanding and the using of knowledge. And there's a lot more focus paid on how to transfer knowledge. And another thing that in the history of learning that people have recognized is the importance of existing knowledge in learning. So learning often builds on someone's existing knowledge. And as you do that, it's important to uncover false beliefs and then partial understandings in order to teach new material to these people, to your students. Another thing that in history of learning that has come up is metacognition, and that is thinking about thinking, meaning having students become aware of what works well for them and what doesn't, so that they are able to consume material in a way that works best for them. Here's a little bit timeline of theories. In the 70s, people were thinking about learning in terms of behaviors, and it was defined as a change in observable behavior. In the 80s, people focused more on cognitive, so defining learning as the active construction of meaning. And then in the 90s, people were focused on talking about social learning, defining learning as a socialization into a new community of knowledge. And then in the 21st century, there have been a lot of new theories that have used things that people knew from past decades, and that they've combined them to expand to new approaches to learning. So here are some well-known learning theories. Bloom's taxonomy was first introduced in 1956, and then adult learning theory came up in the 1960s. There was a lot of history in terms of instructional theory in the in the 70s, and then Kolb's learning theory was introduced in 1984. So, I need to say that I'm definitely not an expert in learning theories. I don't have a master's in education theory. This is something that I picked up and I learned as I wanted to be a better educator and try to be a better consumer and be a more effective educator. So there's tons of theory, there's tons of people that have spent time learning this, but I'm gonna mention 2 of the learning theories that kind of had a more impact on me, and that I thought were reasonable for how I teach. So One of them is Kolb's learning theory, and Kolb's had a 4-point learning theory. He also had a 4-point learning styles that he created, but we're just going to focus on the learning theory that he created. And it has 4 different steps: an experience, reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, and then active experimentation. So here's how Kolb's learning cycle works. When someone has a new experience or is put in a new situation, then as they see that, they take time to reflect and observe. And then as they reflect, they say, are there any inconsistencies before my previous experience, before or my previous knowledge to what I am seeing now? And then as they reflect on that, they go to the next step, which is abstract conceptualization. So after they reflect, the learner will make a decision of, okay, I now have a new idea, or I'm going to modify the previous knowledge that I have into a new way. And then once they do that, the 4th step is the learner applies the new idea or the new modification into the world and see what happens. And then as they do that, they go back to the circle and again, and they will, whenever they have new experiences, they'll base it on the new modification or the new thing that they are applying. So this kind of, makes sense to me. Let's say if I'm teaching a trainee how to do a center line, the trainee probably already comes with an idea of how to put a center line. And then as an educator, I tell him or her, okay, you should put your angle this way, or you should put your angle that way. They would listen to my feedback and they say, oh, okay, he's showing me a new way to do things. Then the learner will conceptualize it, think about it, and will either decide to say, okay, I like Dr. Saleshi's way of doing center lines, so in the future I'm going to do it that way. Or they will say, no, I don't like how he showed me, so I will make some modifications to how I put a center line, and then we'll see what happens. So next time they work with someone else, or when they're putting a center line by themselves, they're going to apply what they have decided to take from what I've taught them. And then when they apply the new way, they might decide it works or not. So that's how Kolb's learning cycle is supposed to work, and that's how he wants us to conceptualize learning. The second one is Bloom's taxonomy. And Bloom's taxonomy was created by Benjamin Bloom in the 1950s. And his thought and idea was to, as educators, we need to think about higher forms of thinking and be able to separate what we teach in levels of, is this something that is as simple as remembering, or is this something that requires creating? And depending on what that subject matter requires, then that helps us to design our educational training. And we will go over Bloom's taxonomy in a little bit more detail during this talk.